All right. Hi. um, Rabbi Isaiah Rothstein, an Orthodox rabbi ordained at Yeshiva University, recently joined the staff of the Jewish Federations of North America as rabbinic scholar and public affairs advisor. Prior to coming to JFNA, he served as rabbi in residence at Chazon, the Jewish Lab for Sustainability, and spiritual educator at Carmel Academy of Greenwich. Growing up in a multiracial Chabad family in Monsey, New York, Rabbi Rothstein sees himself as a human bridge connecting disparate parts of Jewish community. Rothstein is a member of the Schusterman Foundation's ROI Fellowship and was listed as one of the Jewish Week's 36 under 36. So without further ado, Rabbi Rothstein, take it away.
Thank you, friends. Thank you for joining for this time as we honor our lost loved ones, those who were taken from us. And as was already shared, as we think of their names, as I tune in from my apartment in Harlem, if there was only one thing I would offer to you today, it would be this song that we start with, which is about courage. So courage, my friend, you do not walk alone. Yes, we will walk with you and sing your spirit home. Yeah, Pittsburgh, our friends, you do not walk alone. Yes, we will walk with you and sing your spirit home. So friends, I'm so grateful to be here with you. As was already shared by David, thank you, and Carolyn, thank you so much for this invitation to join with you in Torah study. As I'll just say at the start, when we think about Torah study, specifically today, on the second Yortzeit of this heart-wrenching and faithful day, where we recognize really the lowest parts of what comes out of our species, of humanity, and seeing that this person entered this holy sanctuary spaces of the Tree of Life, New Light, and Dor Chadash synagogues. Friends, as we think about this, I can't imagine what it was like to be in that room, in that space, to be in a place that's a sanctuary, to, that idea, and a place where we think of our holidays, the songs that we sing, a place where we bring a sanctuary, a place where we recognize to bring hope and faith to our humanity. Those same places, friends, those same places where we celebrate and where our lives and our life milestones, but also where we recognize, where we come to bring each other comfort. And to be with you today, I just want to say again as an introduction that I can't imagine what it would be like to be in that space. What I want us to recall and to bring to our attention as we come to this day is that we call to memory and our focused intention, our kavanah, that there is a truth about racism, about anti-Semitism, about hate in the world. And the fact is that today when we come together, we're reminding each other that this was an unprecedented and the most deadly attack caused upon Jewish people on American soil. And so we hold many emotions. At least I'll speak for myself. And no less, we commemorate this day during a very troubling time, and a time that during the election week, a time when our country is divided, a time that sometimes it's difficult to see the common ground that we are desiring to lean in with, that we do have this common descendants. We are common descendants of Adam and Eve. But friends, let us remember the rallying cry of Abraham and Sarah, our ancestors, even from this week's Torah portion. Vayigash Avraham, Avram leaned in to the discomfort sometimes of issues, of the problematic nature of society, right? Avram leans in and recognizes the needs. Let us remember that millions of people today, on the 18th of Cheshvan, 2 years ago, around the world, were moved to action. We came together in solidarity to say no to hate. On that Saturday night and that Sunday after the shooting, do you remember the solidarity, that the waves that came through the world to call out evil, light shine through, to remind each other that our ancestors, they call to us, our descendants, they look to us, and we hold up this legacy. So as we begin, and as we have a little bit of Torah study today, share a few texts, we'll sing a little bit, we'll have a conversation, I hope, on the idea of our common humanity, the idea of the stories we tell, what we try to bring into our generation based on what we hold. For some, it's the legacy we hold for our descendants, but we recognize today that the lost loved ones, the people we named just a few moments ago. And I'll just name them again. And may their memory be for a blessing, and may our Torah study today be in their memory. Rose Mallinger, Joyce Feinberg, Daniel Stein, Irving Younger, Melvin Wax, Richard Gottfried, Jerry Rabinowitz, Sylvan Simon, Bernice Simon, Cecile Rosenthal, and David Rosenthal. May their memory be for a blessing. And as the prophet says, Ko Amar Adonai, Ko Berama Nishma, Nehi Bechi Tamrurim, Rachel Mevaka, Al Baneh, Me'anali Nachem Al Baneh, Kenenenu. This is a line from Jeremiah, that Rachel, she weeps for the lost children. She weeps for those who were on the way and were plucked from the world, who were taken from the world. Rachel weeps and she prays that we bring comfort. We bring comfort. So may our Torah study, may it be, as we begin our Torah study, let it be that we lift each other up, lift our spirits, to remind those who we remind each other that those who we lost today, and that this time of hardship may be that we are able to make this day a day that goes from remembering that hardship and be bringing it into a day of light, a day that we remind ourselves of our common humanity, a day that we remind ourselves what it means to stand together regardless of what splintering and polarized society might accomplish, and no less to study Torah. Whoa, to study Torah. We know the word Torah, friends, comes from the word hora'ah, which means to guide us. When we feel stuck in the darkness at times, there's an anecdote that maybe some would say. And so with that, if it's your custom, there's a blessing for reciting Torah study. It's actually a reminder for us that not only are we elevating each other through study, not only are we commemorating and lifting up the voices of the 11 victims of today's memorial of the Yortzeit, we also are providing for each other an opportunity to think about how we as individuals in our own spirit and who we are effectuate change in the world, how we open our eyes to not remain silent and to stand for what is right. So if it's your custom, feel free to sing along. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech haolam Asher Kedishanu B'mitzvosav V'tzivanu La'asok b'divrei Torah. O Galenai ve'abita b'niflao mitorah zeva. Open my eyes and then I will see, oh, the wonders of your Torah. So this line, Gale Nai, open my eyes, is from King David, 3,000 years ago. The tradition, the Jewish tradition, has given us hope, and may it be that we recognize and find our own connection, our own relationship to Torah, and just how our ancestors have studied Torah, just how literally being in a sanctuary, studying and learning Torah, we say that I keep sipping on these words that I'm learning. Yeah, these words give me light. They could turn darkness to light. So we should be blessed, friends. I'm not sure where you are at in terms of your own learning, in terms of learning journey around rabbinic text and Torah. But for today, the core text I want to focus with you on is this text in front of us, Bereshit Rabbah, which comes to us 6th, 7th century, lifting off of the Talmud from the rabbis. And this core text that I wanted to share with you just to begin is really, I think, a text that brings the questions of why humanity and what is the take when it looks at when we were being created according to the minds of the rabbis and the Torah. What was the tension of our creation? Are we a wholesome and powerful and good species? Are we a people, a humanity that builds worlds or builds walls, right? Are we a people that recognizing the flood of the Mabul of Noah, do we build an ark just for us, or do we build an ark for our species as a whole? When it comes to Abraham, is the tent open for all of us? And so this question that emerges from this first text is really recognizing, as we realize today, the hate and evil that sometimes is a part of our humanity. So I'll take a stab at reading it first, and I would love from there if we could just even reflect together what this text might mean to you. How do we relate to this text, especially today in the current lives that we're living, the society in which we live, and also the needs that we have as individuals and also as communities. So I'll start. I'm Rabbi Simon. Simon says, "B'sha'ah sheba HaKadosh Baruch Hu lebrat et ha'adam harishon," when the time came that God was going to create Adam and Eve. Na'asu malachei hashar kitim v'chavuro chavuro mehem omrim al yivra u'mehem omrim yivra. What happens? The angels, and by the way, friends, there are many stories like this in the Talmud of like the angels arguing with God about whether or not humanity should be created. The backdrop of the high holiday liturgy of Yom Kippur, right? Should we be created? Now that we're created, what do we do, right? This idea that, yes, we come from the earth and we'll go to the earth at the end of our lives, but that somehow we together, the time in between, that sacred energy, that sacred time. And so we see here a argument, already fractions of the angels, an election of sorts, sides, weighing in on whether or not humans should be created. So Hadahu Dichtiv, they quote, there's a source that they quote from King David again, Chesed ve'emet nifgashu tzedek v'shalom nishku. That loving kindness and this idea of truth, they came together, and then righteousness and peace kissed. So now we see the argument of the angels. The angels say, well, loving kindness said, let humans be created because they'll do good things. Truth said, are you kidding me? Chesed omer yivrashem, Emet omer, truth said, al yivrashem kulish karim. Don't create them. They're always lying. All day they lie. They're constantly fooling themselves. They manipulate. They don't even know when they're lying. Sometimes we get so caught up in our, right? Don't even try. Tzedek, righteousness comes along. I don't know if you've seen this text before, but righteousness comes along and says, Yevra, Shehu Oset Tzedako. Righteousness comes along and says, yeah, Emet, you might be right. You can imagine this like in an actual live conversation. You might be right. They lie a lot, but guess what? They're eager to do good. They're constantly leaning towards justice. They recognize that the evil in the world, and again, we know we live in a difficult time to believe this about humans, but that is a core of our humanity. Shalom comes by and says, Al Yivra d'chulek tata. Oh, whew, it's not the best thing. Peace says, let them not be created because humans are full of strife. So what did God do, as the text says? God held truth and cast it to the ground. And here's another line that's quoted: truth will be sent to the earth. That the angels somehow, that through the earth, as this text says, let truth arise from the earth. So the truth was sent to the world. That Emet says, Al Yuver, don't create humans because we're constantly lying. But in planet Earth, somehow there's something that happens that when we're here, what we're capable of actually creating in the world. So our rabbis say, and how they weigh in on this text, it's interesting. We have the angels weighing in, we have support from scripture weighing in, but then what we see the rabbis land with is that, and God saw that everything that God made was very good. This is the text from Genesis. Who's included in the very good? Humanity's included in the very good, right? So if God decided that it was a good idea for us to be created, even with all of the different ways in which humanity manifests, in which different people, different countries, different geography, different lenses come into the world, overall, God said that it was good for us to come to the world. And to that, the way it kind of ends with a little bit of humor, while they were arguing about whether humans should have been created, God had already created humanity. So I'm just curious from you, just to pause here, what is this text saying to you? How do you feel about it? That there's a debate whether or not we should have existed, according to the rabbinic tradition. Why do you think this heavenly ordeal is emphasized by the rabbis? This is not the only tale of an argument of the rabbis or of the angels saying humanity. Like, think about what we come together this Yortzeit. We mark the fact that in the same room, there were people praying. We were bringing life into the world. There was a circumcision. It was about growth and evolution. And there was a person who was possessed and sick with evil in the same room. How could it be? How could it be? And the Torah the rabbis are recording this and telling us this. And the Torah records many of our shortcomings. We know this as a species and acknowledges this paradox of humanity, right? We know that there's many examples. So I just would love to hear from anyone who, I'm grateful that it's a small group. We could really hear from each other without it just being chat only. So I'm just curious from you. I'll put the text back up just so you see it in front of you. I just would really love, folks, like, one, have you seen this? What does it remind you of? And also, what are your reactions to this this impression that we've left on the angels? How do you feel about that? Any takers?
So the angels don't have free will. Right? The angels can only do one thing, and that's how they were created, and that's it. I mean, with humans, it's complicated. We have the potential to do tremendous good, and unfortunately, also we have the potential to do tremendous evil. But that's how Hashem created us. He didn't want just angels; He wanted humans, and it's up to us. Are we going to listen to Hashem and let Him into our hearts, and find ways to emphasize chesed and tzedek, or will we not let Hashem into our hearts and allow these other things to take over? And that's the world Hashem created. He saw that as a good world, but a good world isn't perfect.
I love that. Thank you so much, Martin, for sharing that. Martin, just one thing that comes up for me as you share that is it reminds me of another text, a piece of Talmud that says that when Adam and Eve were created, the heavenly angels came, and then Moses, when trying to receive the Torah, the angels say, what's a human doing here? And God said, Moses, what are you going to say? And Moses says, oh, I don't know what to say. And they said, how are you giving the Torah to humans? Look at them. And suddenly God says, grab onto my chair of glory, hold, I'll give you some extra energy. And Moses says, question, you know that line that says, you should respect and honor your parents? Do you have parents, angels? Oh, you know this line, ma enosh tiskarenu, like this line, what are humans that we should be remembered? We have a shelf life. Do you have a shelf life? No. Oh, what about if you see your enemy going along the way with their burden on their donkey? Do you have a burden hanging over you? No. Oh, what about this line of we left Egypt and we were once enslaved and we've experienced persecution. Have you experienced persecution? And the angel said no. And to that, the angels went silent and Moses took the Torah and went down. And I think to Martin's point, we do live in a world where these angels are bringing legitimate claims, right? That we are a muddled species. We make mistakes, we fall, we fail. And it's so easy to look at humans and not to see our common brother, sister, brethren, people, and to see sometimes, and with good reason, at points in the world, and especially again today as we come together. But the idea of Torah is, it's asking us, I think, the rabbis, it's saying, what story do you want to tell? And that goes to I think, in many ways, as we commemorate the lost loved ones from the shooting just 2 years ago today, we know that there is a story of anti-Semitism unprecedented in American society. We know there's a story of splintering, but we also know how powerful it was to see how people come together and stand with each other in solidarity. And we also, so it's like, what story are we telling? And who lives, who dies, who tells our story, that Hamilton reference, right? Not everyone gets to tell their own story. We know that. And so what story are we telling about Pittsburgh, right? We see the strength that has come out of your community. It's mind-blowing. It's inspired the nation. And it's about where we fall. And today in this world, it's so easy to get stuck on what truth said. It's so easy to get stuck on what peace said. But I think we have an opportunity to hang on to what loving kindness said and what justice says. Other reactions? I see a raised hand.
Mute myself. Hi, Judy Bardak.
Hi, Judy.
So I think the rabbis were brilliant, and this is another example, because we, as you said, we are a muddled species, and if God is perfect, how is it? That's the dilemma, the religious dilemma. If God is perfect, how is it that we are so fallible? And so they were troubled by this. I think today, the whole question of that ambivalence really about the human condition. But, and the bigger problem today is not necessarily that the hatred has gotten worse, or the strife has gotten worse, or the lying has gotten worse, but rather that we are bombarded with the media. And according to the media, what sells are human fallibility, not human greatness. And this is what we hear about all the time. Once in a while, there's a story that warms your heart. So I don't know, Rabbi, if you think that that's making things even more difficult, the whole media thing.
I mean, Judy, thank you for raising that, because when it comes to, listen, we know that the Hasidic masters, they write about how everything has an element of good and an element of bad. Now, sometimes it's hard to understand that, I think. But I think one of the thoughts is that on the one hand, we're living in unprecedented times where there's never been more equality, there's never been more communication, there's never been stronger relationships, there's never been more of, like, even just to the point of, as a mixed race Jew, we could save this for another conversation, but there's never been, the world is becoming more racially and ethnically diverse. We see globalization, we see the world that we live in, and at the opportunities, but we also see, frankly, a splintering in society where identity politics is at an all-time high. And we see that seeing that dignity, that sacredness of our humanity, of being able to look at a person on the street and say, hey, You know where you come from, me and you, we come from the same place, right? Like this, there's a, you know, again, and I think Judaism, I don't know what you would say, like the main things that Judaism brought into the world. You know, if someone stopped you in an elevator and said, hey, you Jewish? Or, you know, hey, you appreciate the Jewish tradition? Yeah, tell me like what is the biggest thing that Judaism brought into the world? Like 3,400 years ago? I don't know, what would you answer? Like, feel free to put it in the chat. I would love to hear some reactions if you have your 20-second elevator pitch of what Judaism brings uniquely into the world. But if I were to answer that question, Judy, on the fly, at least this moment, yes, Jeff, definitely Shabbos. Whoa. Well, that is truly the gift, as the rabbis say. And you know, what I would probably say is human rights, human dignity, in a time when people were literally sacrificing their children. As we see from this week's Torah portion, Abraham almost sacrificed his child, right? And so human rights, human dignity, right? There's a famous line from the rabbis, Mipnei ma nivra adam yechidi. Why was Adam and Eve created first? And they respond by saying, so that you don't say that my ancestors are greater than your ancestors. Also, so that you don't say that my ancestors were so bad that how could I ever be better, right? Or that this idea that we're constantly going back every generation to our common humanity. And wow, how incredible that we as a people, the Jewish people, who have experienced literally thousands of years of persecution and anti-Semitism, are still going back to that idea. Every generation. Crazy. So I think it's really powerful for us to think about this.
Rabbi?
Especially today. Yes, Howard.
Yes, to go back to, well, I guess the beginning. So you and Marty were pointing out the essential distinction that we as mortals have free will and the angels, for example, do not. But it's not as if they're automatons. I mean, they do have to do what they are told, but they're having an argument, just like we would. And so I'm curious of what is the rabbinical interpretation for allowing, the fact that there is this cacophony and argument in heaven. But it's also an interesting reflection. They are doing externally, I guess, in a form, that which we can do even internally.
It's yes. And by the way, I think thank you for sharing that, Howard, because just on a literary note, when studying the rabbis or the Talmud and how they will bring to us wisdom, I think there's different lenses to bring. And we see the angels, like you're pointing out, are arguing as if they were human, right? Like as if they have a say. What's interesting also is the rabbis, they cadence this text by saying we're good. But what's also interesting, right, because God said we were good, but what's also interesting, we know, friends, that God doesn't spend, much time in the narrative of the Torah to say that humanity is also evil. God says, Ki yetzer lev adam hu ra min ha'arav. After the flood, God says, you know what, I'm not going to try to destroy this species. I did a flood, I'm never going to do it again. I tried, I created this species to be like me, an image in the image of God, and they are. Right? We stand on 2 feet. We have a vertical relationship. We literally forget the moon. We are now leaving the solar system with our machines. Like we as a species are beyond powerful. And yet God also in the same breath almost acknowledges the paradox, I think, of being our species, of recognize. And that's why I think going to the idea of Torah, another line from the rabbis is that Torah is supposed to help guide us. It's supposed to help us temper the animalistic tendencies, so to speak. Values, we know that the idea of our values, it's to make meaning. Yes, it's to share in community, but functionally, it's also supposed to help us steer through a life that sometimes has cacophony, right? That's muddled, as we've been speaking of. Thank you for sharing that. Other reactions to this text? Okay, friends. Oh yeah, please, David.
It's sort of in reaction to sort of the idea of like angels being like having one mindset sort of. I've seen this text before, and I think the thing that bugs me about it is that even though there are two dissenting opinions, only one of them gets a reaction from Hashem. So both truth and peace say don't create man, but only truth gets thrown to the ground. Whether that's a punishment or a like that's a whole conversation. Is what does that mean? But peace gets ignored, I guess, and like I don't know. It's just something that bugs me. So why, if they're angels and this is their purpose and they're fulfilling their purpose by without free will, then why is there a punishment for, or at least only reaction to one of them for fulfillment of purpose?
I love that question. Anyone want to respond to that? I have a lot of feelings and thoughts, a lot of spinning things, but any reactions to David's question? It's really powerful. I'll say, I mean, the idea, I think the question that I see emerging is, why is truth get this focus? And I guess the question I would ask on your question is truth being punished, or is truth being given an opportunity? There's a challenge with truth in this, something about the emet, this word emet, which we know is about synthesis, right? It's about integration.
I think part of to answer my own question,
yeah.
I think part of my thought process with truth, at least why truth gets some focus, is that being sent down to earth and needing to rise from earth is saying like you're going to live with humanity, and humanity is going to struggle with you throughout existence. While peace is it's clear, this is peace, this is strife. But truth, we're going to struggle with, what does truth mean?
That strikes me, because this idea of struggle, it's like the pursuit, the perpetual, the ongoing pursuit to struggle to find and seek truth. I think, by the way, I'll say, working for Jewish Federations of North America for about 4 months, but knowing the legacy of federations that goes on for about 100 years, the perpetual pursuit of truth, of justice, of serving, of giving back to vulnerable populations, people in need, that ongoing, it doesn't end. And so, David, to that thought, I love that. It's almost like we are going to have to wrestle and struggle all day, our whole life as a species. That's a part of our ongoing reality. Thank you for that. Yes, please.
So if,
Amy.
yeah, if you have the idea of loving kindness already being there, and you then add truth, without the truth, you're not going to have the justice and the peace. And so you've got the loving kindness. That's one of the building blocks. You add the truth. You've added the other building block that people need to achieve on their own the justice, and with the guidance of Torah, but you have the opportunity to create the justice and the peace. Without the truth, it's not going to happen. Loving kindness alone is not going to create that.
From deep dives to daily briefs.
Oops, sorry.
CNN Politics Podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing a little bit, Amy, from what you're saying, and all good. It's like almost an equation. It's ingredients. One needs the other to strive. Loving kindness alone, right? There's a need for truth. I really appreciate that. I also, Carolyn, I don't know if you want to weigh in here. I'm seeing that you put in the chat that you were going to, and by the way, this is the beauty of Torah, right? This is why for thousands of years, our ancestors have gathered around fires, in dark candlelit rooms, singing songs and eating, I don't know what, depending on where you're from. Yes, that we could look at the same text with many perspectives. Carolyn, do you want to weigh in on that? What you were writing about?
Sure. I mean, literally, as David was talking, I'm thinking the exact opposite when I look at this. I see that lies and truth seem much more like a black and white concept. There's truth in the world and there's lies. but peace is sort of unknown. We struggle, when are we at peace? And that strife is something that it's not necessarily a negative. Strife helps us to grow and to maybe get closer to that peace. So that was just sort of my idea, the opposite of what David said.
Mm.
Let's fight about it, David.
You know, and so on this note, like just pointing out the terms here, right? This idea, chesed, emet, tzedek, shalom, right? Kindness or loving kindness is chesed, emet being truth, tzedek, righteousness, shalom, peace, right? I think like we really truly, as we know, could spend a day on each of these terms, right? In terms of defining terms and language to recognize what they mean and how they hold up for us. I think, so anyway, really, really rich discussion. I don't know if anyone would like to add other thoughts before we kind of, I just noticing the time. I have, by the way, like 6 other texts for you, but clearly we could spend all day. And frankly, by the way, we should, because we see today, it's like doing spiritual push-ups to believe in humanity, to believe in not Jews versus non-Jews, not this person, literally just, we see what the headlines are showing us, right? We see the fragmentation and it's like our ancient tradition for 1,000 years, for thousands of years have been telling us to constantly struggle, as we'll use that word, David, thank you, to struggle in pursuit of these values, and maybe to prove the angels wrong, right? Like, I think that's like a piece of it, of the puzzle as well. Okay, good to be here. Really, I'm so grateful that we were able to just delve into this one text. And also I'm more than happy to follow up with other texts on this topic. As we move into just some few other closing thoughts and teachings, I wanted, on the note of memory, right? So what was our first text? For me, in many ways, our first text is like, what is our baseline of our species? The baseline of our species is muddled. We as people with free will, and again, going into a deeper conversation like Howard was starting to mention for us, I think hopefully we could continue. We shouldn't be limited to the Zoom room for these conversations, I hope. But on that idea, it's like, okay, then if there's an argument of who we are and our quality of being in this world, we then decide what story we want to tell, right? And we have the free will, the lens, the ability to choose, right? To choose. And in the face of bigotry and hatred, in the face of when someone walked into this shul, into this space, right? And we see friends, unfortunately, it's not the first time that someone has violated the safety and a haven of a sanctuary. I'll tell you, as a mixed race Jew, my mom's maiden name is Robertson. One of the 4 girls who was murdered in the church bombing in 1963 was my cousin, Carol Robertson, right? Going there, it's like, you walk into a shul, what do you expect from a shul? You expect to be a synagogue, right? You want to be comforted, you want to be seen. And so we're reminded that we have a choice to make in terms of what story we tell, especially on behalf of those who were murdered. And so on that note, as we step into this day, I know a lot of people see this day as many things, but it's the yortzeit of this experience, of this moment. And when on the yortzeit, we recall memory. And I think there's a lot to say on memory as a topic in Judaism. We'll use the chat function. I hope you're able to just throw out, what are examples in the Jewish tradition that highlight the power of memory? What are just like, let's get the collective energy in the room. I'm sure we could identify something in the tradition that makes you feel that it really hones in on this focus of memory, because we know memory is storytelling, right? This idea of what could you recall, right? Friends, what could you recall? Thank you for mentioning the Seder night, because the Seder is about what are you able to recall? The mitzvah is about your story, your voice. Don't ask the questions the way someone else, okay, yeah, there's a stage, man, ishtana, but we know really it's truly about, right? And the rabbis say that ask according, tzachot lishono, that according to your own ability of speech. So what story do we want to tell? That's our first question from the first text. But on the note of Judaism and memory, the constant reminder, friends, this constant reminder to live and to tell the stories. Thank you for commenting in the chat. Just a few examples. I mean, there are a few texts that I pulled up for us, but I'll just paraphrase because I realize that I only have a few more moments with you. So there's one line that I really love that we actually recall on fast days. On days of mourning, it's read in the Torah reading. It goes, Zachor l'Avraham, li'Yitzchak u'Yisrael avadecha. The word Zachor, Zachor, it has a primary focus. The trope, the song even pulls us up to the word. And it says, remember that your ancestors and what I did for them and what I told them, and this is speaking to our ancestors, the matriarchs and patriarchs, but this idea of memory, friends, as we see again in the chat, Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaShoah, Tisha B'Av, even in this week's Torah portion. In fact, on Yom Hadin, Rosh Hashanah, the Torah readings of Rosh Hashanah come from this week's Torah portion, and we know that Rosh Hashanah is called Yom Zichron Trua, a day of remembering. Remembering what? In the Torah readings that we see in this week's Torah portion, we see this idea of Sarah being remembered. There's a recalling. And with this, I'll close and hope to just sing a song to land with. But this idea of recalling versus remembering. There's two words that the rabbis use for this focus. One is Zachor, like Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day. Yizkor, memory. Zecher L'Maseh Bereshis, remembering the Exodus. Retelling. Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim, remembering the Exodus. Right? These are how I tell a story. But then there's Pakad, right? There's Pakudim. There's Lifkod. There's Pakod Pakadati Etzchem. So one is Zecher is this idea of just remembering. Today is the Yortzeit of the 18th of Cheshvan, the Yortzeit of the shooting that took place in Pittsburgh in these 3 synagogues, right? Pakad is when I focus, when I put my energy into the day. When I look at the day and I don't just recall it, but I put my heart in it. I recognize that these people, they're not with us right now. I recognize that what the day represents both in the hardship, as the angels argued, and also in what's possible. And I think that, friends, this idea of pakad versus zecher. One, we are here together, we are recalling, we are zecher, we are in the moment. But pakad is, what are we going to do with the moment? How are we going to actualize and bring it to life? And I think there's no better way than to really come together, to study our ancient tradition, to come together as community, and to give each other strength. And so, as we started with a song about courage, courage, really, this idea, we should be blessed. We should be blessed to build a world from love. And as this song is sung and by us at this moment, it should really be something that could spread throughout the world. So I hope you'll join me in singing wherever you are. The beauty of the mute function is no one will hear you. So you could sing your heart out, Or if that's not your vibe, which I totally respect, really look at the words, like take them in and feel free to just say them if that feels better. And from there, Carolyn, I'll hand it back to you. So on that note, if you could just put in the chat, what are ways in which you will bring, what is an action item, a pakad kind of, not a zecher, but a pakadati kind of thing for today? How will you remember today, the Yortzeit? But also, what are things that you will do to lift up this world and build a world from love? Oh, I will build this world from love. And you must build this world from love. Friends, we have what it takes. And if we build Then God will build this world from love. Oh, olam chesed yibaneh. So friends, thank you again for joining. I'll say that, yes, the angels may have said what they said in that text, but we know that we wrestle, and we know that we change the narrative, and we know that we are capable of building this world from love. So thank you again.
Thank you, Rabbi Isaiah Rothstein, for your teaching today, and thank you to all of you for participating. We close with Kaddish Rabbanan, led by Marty Gaynor, a survivor of the attack. A link to the text is in the chat. You can also stay on this link in the Zoom room if you would like to continue learning with Rabbi Cheryl Klein after this.
Thank you, Shkoyach. Rabbi Rothstein, thank you so much for being with us and leading us together in this learning. We truly are honoring the memories of the 11 Kedoshim. Please join me in reciting Kaddish Rabbanan. Yis Gadal, v'yis Gadash me Rabbah. V'amad divrach irusei, v'yamlich malchusei, v'chaye chayin, v'yameh chayin, v'chaye d'chol beis Yisroel, v'agalav v'zman kure v'imru umein. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevarach, l'olam lo me'amaya. Yis barach, v'yis tabach, v'yis ba'ar, v'yis ramam, v'yis naseh. V'yis hadar, v'yis alev, v'yis alal, shmei d'kudashah, birchu. Leila men kol birchosa v'shirasa, tush b'chosa v'nechamosa, domiram v'yama, v'imru umein. Al Yisroel, v'al Rabbanan, v'al Talmidei Hain, v'al kol Talmidei Hain, v'al kol mun daskin boraisa, di b'asra hadain v'di v'chol lasar v'asar, Yehei lahain elachain shlama rabba, china v'chista v'rachame, v'chai arichei mezayne revichei, ufur kona min kodam alu hain dishmaya, v'imru umein. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya, v'chaim tevim, aleni v'al kol Yisroel, v'imru umein. Oisei sholom b'marmav, hu yasev v'rachamav sholom, aleni v'al kol Yisroel, v'imru umein.